Welcome to Pieces for My Puzzle. I'm your host, Nikki Shipp, and I'm excited to be sharing with you my life with a son on the spectrum. This podcast is for anyone who is looking for quick tips and perspective, but most of all, for hope and inspiration. So sit back, relax, and let's put the pieces together. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Pieces for My Puzzle. I'm your host, Nikki Shipp. Thank you so much for joining us today. Last week, we spoke to personal trainer Tyler Smith about the benefits of getting in the gym with your autistic child. Great episodes. We had a part 1 and a part 2, so if you did not get a chance to tune into those, please do. They were phenomenal, and I think you'll find a lot of information from them. This week, I am really excited because we're going to talk about the dad's perspective, and I have none other than my husband, Patrick Shipp, on the show today. Thank you so much for being on the show today, honey.
Oh, thanks for having me today.
I feel like this is going to be such a fun episode. Mm-hmm. Are we going to have fun?
Yeah. It was always an adventure.
Always an adventure is right. So we're going to be talking a little bit about the dad's perspective. But before we lead into that, I want to say that today is actually our 50th episode. So I'm really excited. I just wanted to do a quick shout out and tell everyone thank you so much for your continued support and listening. Very excited that we've hit number 50, and we hope to just keep on going. But the reason why I wanted to have this episode today was a lot of times we don't talk about maybe how dad's feeling in the situation. You've heard me over this past year talk a lot about my perspective and things that we've done with Drayson and what we've done as a family. But I think it's important to bring in dad's perspective. So that's why I asked my husband, Pat, to be on the show today, because obviously he has some great firsthand experience. So I'll just kind of jump right in, honey. Mm-hmm. So think about when Drayson was first diagnosed, and I know that was a challenge for both of us, but I want specifically for you today just to kind of talk about what ran through your mind initially when that diagnosis came through.
Well, it actually even started before that, because when Drayson was first even suggested that there might be some autism going on was during a wellness check with our pediatrician. Mm-hmm. And when she started identifying some behaviors that she saw just in this well check, and, she has a background with some special needs, pediatric stuff. And so she
implicated.
Yeah, she, without trying to make us be worried, she goes, hey, there might be some levels of, might see some stuff of autism there. I don't want to, alarm you yet, but, here's a referral to, to a developmental pediatrician to kind of get that ball rolling. And as a dad, here I am in this exam room and seeing Drayson, run around and doing what he was doing.
I think he was stemming, wasn't he?
He was stemming. He was tiptoe walking. And again, he was just kind of doing some of that stuff that we thought on a daily basis he was just kind of, normal. He had like mastered his ABCs, and, he was reading some stuff. And,
but he wasn't talking to us.
But he wasn't talking. And so when that kind of gets dropped on you out of the blue, you kind of go, what is that? What is autism? What's on the spectrum, or, what are those terms mean? And so, coming home and talking to Nikki, saying, hey, this is what the pediatrician said, and here's a referral to a developmental pediatrician to have him tested for possibly being on the spectrum with autism. Mm-hmm. And so even at that point, it really started kind of changing, because you didn't know what the future was going to hold, really. And so as we went through that process, with the diagnosis and Drayson being tested, and, there's so many questionnaires, at one point I know Nikki, started filling one out, and it just became overwhelming, where she's like, I can't do this. Here, you need to finish this, 7 or 8 page packet of, what does your kid do? Does they do this? Do they do that? And it really started kind of breaking, things down. And so, having to kind of pick that up and run with it, and then sitting in with the developmental pediatrician and seeing their observations and, everything kind of coming together on, okay, well, kind of answered some of the smaller questions. I'm like, oh, why was he doing this?
Like it started to make sense a little bit.
And so, after our last appointment with the developmental pediatrician, she came out and said, yes, I'm going to, give a diagnosis of your son being on the spectrum and, kind of go from there. And that was at that point, I think me and Nikki even looked at each other in the room there and was like at that moment, things like automatically changed. Like we knew, like somehow, some way that our future was going to be completely different than what we thought it was going to be. Because, I was that dad when Drayson was born. I think a couple days after that, I had gone online and looked on what his graduation date from the Air Force Academy was going to look like. So again, you have these these plans and stuff, and then all of a sudden this gets dropped in you, and you go, okay, well, doesn't mean that that's not going to happen, but your life is definitely going to change in multiple ways. And so sitting down and actually I think even when we left out of the building and we were sat in a car, that was like the huge moment. I think we just sat there and kind of looked at each other and was like, all right, well, whatever it takes to give Drayson the resources and everything he needs, because our developmental pediatrician actually had given us like a list of 6 things to do. I think 5 or 6 things.
It was quite a long list. And just to kind of explain to the listeners today, or for those of you watching, that Drayson hadn't been speaking to us directly at all at this point. Like he was repeating shows, he was learning his ABCs, he was doing all these other things, but he wasn't responding to us. He hadn't even called me mom or you dad, and he was 3 years old when he was diagnosed. And so I think the first thing I said to you actually in the car was, I think I said something like, "This is bullshit. He's going to call me mom." Or said something like that. Yeah. I remember, because I was so focused on the fact of that she said, well, he may or may not call you mom and may or may not call you dad. And I was like, that was my first goal, was I just wanted him to call me mom.
Right.
Remember?
Yeah.
That was like, and it kind of started off that simply as far as going through that process, right? So so you had this ideal expectation of what you thought our son was going to be, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know, that probably involved, it sounds like Air Force, maybe, I don't know, track star, football star.
Yeah, I mean, all the I hate to say that, the cliche things that like parents, want their kids to be able to accomplish, and watch them grow up and, have friends and the social activity and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But again, not knowing, I mean, literally 5 minutes after we walked out of the pediatrician's office, getting a diagnosis was like, what's autism?
We're like, just stunned, yeah.
What's the next step from here? And again, that list that she'd given us,
It was a little numbing, I think, for us both.
It was, because, and I even think like, we literally sat in that parking space for...
It was for a while.
20, 30 minutes.
Yeah, outside talking. I think we drove separate. But we were there talking until we decided to drive because for something. But anyway.
And at one point, I think in my mind, I said, well, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
If I have to give up certain things to make sure that he has what he needs to be successful. Mm-hmm. Again, this was not even knowing exactly what fully autism was, other than what the developmental pediatrician had told us.
And I don't think we realized that, even though she had said it, I don't think we realized that this was forever, right? Like she had said that this was long term. It wasn't, this is an always thing. It's not gonna, things will get better, but like this will, he will always be autistic. There's no way to change that. And I remember for us, even though she said that to us, I don't think we really realized that until later. Mm-hmm. Could you describe to our listeners, or for those watching on YouTube today, I've said in past episodes that I've grieved, that our grieving process was different. Did you grieve maybe what you thought Drayson was going to become, the idea or the thought? Did that feel like you had to grieve a little bit of that before?
Yeah, absolutely. Because again, it's a complete life-changing event of what, you think you're going to get to do as a dad, and watch, your child, grow up and kind of experience the things that like normal kids do, like hey, I'm on a baseball team, or taking them to soccer practice, or like a lot of events, or things that you are interested in, and going, are they going to be able to do that with some ability on their own,
right?
Kind of thing. Are they always going to be independent, or how independent are they going to be? So for me, a lot of time, and I still have moments like that.
Absolutely.
I still have moments where I go, oh, man, like if I could only, if we could only do this, or if we could only do that. And then I have to kind of pop myself back in and say, well, this is what we have. Like, this is our environment that we're working with Drayson, and to make him as successful as we can. Because again, it really boils down to, like, if we're not being advocates for him, or providing the service, and providing him the services that he's going to need to be successful, then we're not doing our job. So I think at one point in my head, I said, well, whatever it takes. It was kind of like my motto. Like, did
you feel, but right before that, did you feel like anger or sadness, or like I felt sad and depressed? I don't know. Like, I think there were a few moments, if I recall, in conversations, like it wasn't that you were angry, but you've almost felt kind of resentment, I think, or anger towards the situation.
Yeah. I did have some kind of emotional, roller coaster back and forth. I felt some sadness, because, again, we're like, what caused it?
Right.
What caused it, or
why
out of, every child now it's, Drayson,
right.
Why?
And I remember us having those conversations. I remember you saying, why did this happen? And I think between the two of us, you were a little bit more stuck on the why, if I recall.
Yeah. Again, if anybody knows me, sometimes I keep a lot of stuff under wraps. I'm not.
I don't know what he's talking about.
I keep my emotions kind of pinned in sometimes. Because again, my job, I want to be there for Nikki and for Drayson, and again, it's not up to me to, become an emotional, bubbling, mess sometimes. Yeah. So I, try to put on that stoic face and be that strong person there.
But
and
it's been good to be transparent about it.
And it has, and I, a lot of the times, especially in the very beginning, and Nikki may not even know this because again, like sometimes my inability to show my...
Are you confessing right now on a podcast?
Sometimes.
Oh, my gosh. Okay.
But there's times where, like, by myself, when I was at work or I was away from, from the house, I would have those moments by myself just thinking, okay, what's next? Or why this happened? Or how am I going to get through this? Like, how are we going to, how are we going to get this to a point where he's going to be independent, or is he ever going to be independent? Yeah. And again, a lot of the times, like getting that in my head and having those questions kind of bounce around, because I was waiting for like our family and friends and stuff like that to be able to, ask us those questions and have a response to that. So, a lot of the times, when I had a moment alone, it dominated a lot of my thought, at the very beginning of like, oh my gosh, like what's going to happen now?
And I think that that's totally normal as parents to feel that way. I think sometimes too, like, and for those of you that do have kids on the spectrum, I'm sure you can all attest to that. Like, I've had plenty of those quiet moments myself where it's like, okay, I just need to take a step back and collect myself. And I kind of have the, well, why, but I've been more focused on, I think, action than the why, because, and I've said in past episodes, like, I don't have time to worry about the why, I have time to help Drayson. And so that's kind of always been the approach that we've taken. A little bit about, and our grieving process was totally different. I think for you, it was something where I think it took you a little bit longer to go, okay, I'm going to be okay with this, versus me. I more of had a reactionary of what do we need to do, and then once I got him set up, then I had the reaction of, okay, oh my gosh, like this is what it really is. So mine was almost, I think, a little bit delayed in comparison to what happened through your grieving process, or or purging, or however you want to phrase it.
And again, if anybody knows Nikki, she was like, okay, I'm going to crack the whip. It's time to get things going. Here's our list of things that we need to do. Let's get this show on the road because, we don't have time to wait. And so again, everybody has those different time frames, how long it takes for them to grieve or accept or understand what's happening. And, but that's what makes us all different, and again, like I said, Nikki took the reins and said, okay, I'm going to make all these phone calls. I'm going to start making these appointments. This is what our developmental pediatrician wants us to see by the next, in the next 6 months, when we go back for a follow-up. She gave us this list of X, Y, and Z to be done. And Nikki's like, all right. And then I think it was literally like the next day she was on the phone, making these appointments. And, of course, I'm still kind of, like, what just happened? What just happened the last day, in the last day or.
Yeah. And there's a whole nother side to this, right? Like it's not just navigating what we had to do for Drayson. We almost had to decide what we were going to navigate telling the family and how to help people to understand what autism was, because we were still learning that. And I don't know if you remember, but in the beginning, some of the questions that we got flooded with were almost a little like made us take a couple steps back. Like, whoa, wait a minute. And we still get those questions today, all the time. People are, do you think Drayson will ever be able to live on his own? Do you think Drayson will ever have a relationship? And all of those things. And, those are hard questions, I think, as a parent to answer to friends and family who don't necessarily have experience with that. And so we were really lucky because we were able to really rein in also our support. But we really, would you say, and I've described this before on other episodes, but would you say that we really had to talk to our families about the level of support, like emotionally, not necessarily therapy-wise or anything, but emotionally the support that we would need as a family?
Yeah, stop and listen, and listening and asking questions and understanding. Because there was a frustrating time there where, we'd have some family members who just didn't either understand or get it and just thought, that they,
and for us to try to not take offense to it,
right.
Like there was nothing that they were doing wrong. It's just that it is a little bit, you are a little bit taken aback when people ask you those questions. Like I even had somebody ask me, do you think he's on the spectrum because you're an older mom? Because I was in my mid-30s when I had Drayson. And so I was a little bit taken aback by just even that question, but I think it helped us to realize that there were a lot of misconceptions that maybe people have, and that it was also our job to not just help Drayson, but to educate and so
our family members.
That was a whole nother overwhelming dynamic, I think, that we've both experienced on.
Yeah, and it's an ongoing thing. I mean, some people that I work with, sometimes they kind of lose or, like they have questions, but we've kind of transformed that into making bigger strides for awareness, between our family members, our friends, coworkers, and like that. So, but again, every once in a while, I mean, even today now, like, Nikki asked, about the emotional stuff. There's times where I'm just exhausted, because he's had, like 2 or 3 nights of bad sleep or, something like that's going along. And, I try to take that brunt of the action with that. And so, there's times where I'm, operating on, 4.5 hours of sleep and then trying to go in and work and perform what I need to do. And, after a couple of days of that, I have those moments like I'm sitting in a truck and, everybody's had those days where you're like, you get in your car and you're heading home and it may be a 15-minute drive, a 45-minute drive, but it's that one day where you're like, I'm not even turning on the radio. I want silence in the car, and you're just driving down the road. You're listening to the hum of the tires. You don't even want to put music on or radio.
Have you ever just thought, like, what if I just drive?
Yeah.
What if I just drive?
Yeah, I was like, do I go north or do I go south? Do I get on the freeway and just keep driving until I go, where am I going to go?
Am I heading out of state? What's happening?
And Nikki's had those days where she's like, I'm just leaving.
Yeah.
I was like, where are we going? No, it's not the question of where we are going. It's where I'm going. I need to go and have some alone time. Yeah.
And I think for us too, and for any couple or marriage, like it's knowing that, okay, I've got to take the reins on this because you know, my spouse can't. And so I think that that's been something really great that you and I have been able to read each other that way, because it's hard. Like, and it's hard because sometimes even when I ask for that, I feel guilty because I know he's still taking the brunt of it. Like we understand that aspect and that dynamic so much. So I think that that it's also giving us the breaks that we need, right?
Yeah, and but, sorry.
No, it's okay. So tell me a little bit about so what has the process been like for you navigating Drayson's autism?
As far as the process, I mean, just trying to educate yourself. There's a lot of weird stuff out there that people come up on, like, different therapies, for autism, or, the reasons behind it, diet or age or whatever it is. And frankly, they don't know what causes it. And, that was, I think, one of the things, is like, we went back and we're like, well, what did we do? We created
because it's immediately
we created this little human being between the both of us, and so we added something, and something went in there, and now we have a child on the spectrum. But again, they don't have an answer for it, and so like navigating all of his stuff again. I think it really falls down to education. Like educating yourself, and any reasonable person can weed out all the junk that's out there versus what the scientific outcomes, versus, I mean, I remember them saying that there was some, the autism starts in the womb, and, to reprogram the child, they would put them in a sack hanging from the roof and flash flashlights outside the sack. And I'm thinking, what?
Yeah.
Like, that's terrible.
And knowing how to decipher that information,
right? And again,
finding out what's credible and
what's credible, what's not credible. Where the weirdness there, and then what's the stuff that has the scientific backing behind it. And like I said, really it's about educating yourself. And the more that you're educated, you as a parent, that helps you be able to educate family members, friends, just the general public. When you're out and about. But again. Just trying to stay on top of things, because if anybody has known us for a while, Nikki takes a lot of the brunt on the admin side, I guess how you call it, with
the paperwork,
the 3-ring binders.
It's my most favorite part. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I know.
I love it. I love all of the paperwork.
We've got 3-inch 3-ring binders full of every eval that he's had, every conversation with his in-home providers, IEPs, you name it, and that's where like Nikki comes in, and she's super good at that, keeping us on track and finding stuff.
But would you say, though, it's not just the logistics of getting the therapies together? I mean, even to be open to that, would you agree that there has to be a mindset about that?
Yes.
Do you feel that, because I've mentioned this on previous episodes, like I've point blank said to people listening that you have to get out of your own head and kind of remove yourself emotionally from how you're feeling. Not that you shouldn't feel that way or be able to process that, but do you also feel that there's a mindset that is connected to having to go down those rabbit holes of getting therapies in place, looking for resources, that it's not just educating yourself, but like the mindset of it.
Yeah, and being open. That the mindset is huge, just because you can't take a break.
Yeah,
there's not a hey, I'm just going to hold off and do this, and maybe next month. Because again, it's a never ongoing process. His HAB changes and his HAB needs change. Since he was diagnosed up until now, and so that mindset is continuously changing, and you just don't get a chance to kind of step back from it. But again, that's where where I can read Nikki sometimes and say, oh, she's kind of struggling with some stuff. Now it's time for me to kind of jump in there, or with our schedules with work as well, being able to say, hey, let me sit in on this meeting so that you can, get whatever else it is you're done, and then
Right, because we have just daily life in general, aside from Drayson being autistic, we've got life, like things are happening. So it's a lot to juggle. Yeah, for sure. So what have you noticed from other parents, friends, and maybe family on their perception of Drayson and his autism, or just in general? Like, I know you and I have had really extended talks about this subject, but what have you noticed from parents and friends and family?
From what I've noticed, the more time that you spend around, or we have Drayson around our friends and family, one, helps him obviously be more comfortable being in situations where, you can open up that conversation for more questions. In the beginning, and even so, more so now too, depending, because we come across new situations every single time. Like, there's always a different adventure going on. We're trying something different environment. I don't know if Nikki had mentioned this in previous episodes, just with Drayson was deathly afraid of dogs. And I don't know if that was something that you touched on.
You didn't listen to that episode?
What's that? No, because I lived it.
Good comeback. That was a good comeback. Got lucky there.
So, people's understanding and helping us out with, something simple as that, being comfortable around dogs. Drayson was deathly afraid of dogs. We had some dear family, or we call them family now, some friends, that had different range and size of dogs, and over a short amount of time, and maybe a week, in the initial stages, we were able to get Drayson comfortable enough to be around dogs. And then that translated into, us owning our own dogs, and Drayson being okay with.
But we wouldn't have been able to do that without family and friends. Yeah,
we wouldn't be able to do that without the family support and friends and stuff like that, and being understanding and patient, because again, one of our biggest things is, still, for me at least, is, having patience and getting people to not tip their glasses and say, well, what's wrong? What's wrong with him? Or why doesn't he do this? I joke sometimes with, my students, that, the reason I am so patient and, is because of Drayson.
Yeah, I know.
I was like, if I can handle you guys, if I can handle him, I can handle anything you throw at us. But with friends and family, again, it's just that being open to answer questions and to just be open-minded,
right?
As far as communication, between them too. Right. And it's frustrating sometimes too.
And I think our friends and family have really opened up quite a bit. I mean, I think at first, filtering the questions and the maybe misconceptions about it, things like that. I think that at first, once we got past that, we've been very lucky to establish a strong support group of people. So that's been great. We're going to continue this talk into our next episode, so stay tuned for part 2 next week. But for today, this concludes our episode. So thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate you listening, and hopefully we can give you some good parent perspective on what it's like for us. And this concludes our 50th episode. Again, I cannot believe this is our 50th episode. So thanks so much for tuning in. If you like what you're hearing, please feel free to give us a good rating on your preferred podcast platform of choice. If you have questions, comments, or even maybe a subject that you would like to hear on the show, please feel free to email us at info@piecesformypuzzle.com. And don't forget to like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram if you haven't already, or feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel at Pieces for My Puzzle. Until next time, we will see you next week. But until next time, keep working on your puzzle. And remember, you don't have to have it all solved in a day. Take care.